Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to the Hindu analysis. Today we'll be discussing a very interesting set of topics out of the Hindu newspaper. Good morning to all of you. First is the WTO session is coming. So what is the status of the WTO? Why is it become more and more irrelevant per se? Then we'll talk about a demographic trend which is emerging and what is going to be the implication for that. These two are editorials, including this one, which is a data point article, how children have been affected by war and specifically of Israel's action. The text and context for this newspaper needs to be dealt separately with regards to a proposed bill with regards to transgenders. We will deal with that separately. Here, we would like to concentrate on these three editorials with regards to WTO, demographic trend, and Israel, and how it has impacted the Gaza Strip and Palestine generally. Then we'll talk about smaller topics but important ones. For example, the gains which we've seen in the different what we call as child death data, which be it neonatal, be it the under 5. Then a fallout of the West Asian crisis, which is plastic goods. Then we'll talk about a scheme which was in the news. And last, we will discuss a new discovery through the Large Hadron Collider as operated by CERN, a very interesting particle which has been found like a proton but is heavier in that regard. So we have a good mix of topics from GS paper 2 to 4 to 3 to prelims orientation and to, for example, this is purely prelims oriented and will be important because of the term which is there. So we'll talk about that. Good morning, good morning. Okay. Now, before we begin, you may have seen this previously also, but this is very, very important. With regards to our pricing, 18th March is gone. Today you will see a price hike at 18,999 for the same things which you were getting yesterday, which is a 17,999. And if you are not going to use the code IAS English and become part of the Unacademy family, if you have ever considered it, then from 20 and 21st, it will reach 19,999. So the offer for 18,999 will end tonight. So I've been told this is the way it is going to go up. Use the code IAS English if you consider or if you have been considering to become a part of the Unacademy family. Okay. With this, let's start our analysis for today. Everybody is here. Can we start? Yes, sir. No, sir. Good morning. A lot of you have messaged me the marathon PPT of art and culture along with this PPT, which is the CNA PPT, will be uploaded to my channel. I'll rather write at Abhishek history. This is the Telegram channel in which you will find both art and culture marathon PPT and CNA PPT, both. I'll upload it as soon as the session is over. Both of them, this has now been processed and is now available, and this will be added as soon as it will be available through this system. Okay. Now let's talk about the WTO. 5 years, you can go into the past, maybe a decade. WTO was considered to be a very important organization. From the 2000s to the 2020s, the idea of multilateralism was very, very important. That the UN is a very important body, sacrosanct body, very important body. Then WTO, extremely important, G7, Quad. The idea was that multilateral cooperation is the future of geopolitics, However, what has happened is, in the past 5 years, from 2020 to 2025, and specifically from Russia-Ukraine war in that regard, bilateralism, unilateral decisions have become more and more common. And the biggest harbinger, or you can say the vanguard of multilateralism, was the US. And this is where the US itself started to become a dictatorial power, if you want to call it, in geopolitics, because its own unilateral decisions started to become problematic. So when we talk about multilateralism, the US in a way has created a lot of institutions through which it controlled what is called as neo-imperialistic tendencies which it had, or what is called as neocolonialism, which is through institutions it used to control countries. One such body would be the World Bank or the IMF. Equally, the UN acts in the interest of the US, and the WTO was equally very, very important, because the World Trade Organization was considered to be an organization which could regulate the world movement, the global economy, as it was getting more and more integrated. But at the same point of time, any dispute which emerges in the process of trade, the WTO was considered to be a very important body per se. Now, for anybody who's been preparing for 2 to 3 years, they would know that WTO based amber box, green box, blue box, even the way the most favored nation concept comes through, or its sanctions were considered to be very, very problematic for nations. And at the same point of time, everybody was used to abide by the rules of the WTO. But since 2020, there has been a dilution of the role of WTO. And though a WTO session is coming, see, World Bank, IMF, multiple organizations such as the SCO came up in order to undercut the hegemonic power of the US with regards to how World Bank and IMF, we had the ADB, the Asian Development Bank. Countries started to use regional groupings in such a way that they were able to undercut the World Bank and IMF. At the same point of time, the UN, which, as you can see in the Iran-Israel war, is just a useless organization which has no real executive power. It's a toothless dog in the hands of the US. UN was now considered to be more and more irrelevant. The G7, Quad, and regional groupings started to become more and more important. And in this, BRICS was considered to be a very important organization. And in order to undercut the WTO, FTAs became very important, which is free trade agreements and bilateral agreements, which is two countries coming together, not violating any WTO regulation per se, but going into a favorable understanding per se. And this is where WTO came under attack from the FTAs, from the bilateral agreements, that we really don't need to go to a multilateral institution and just together have an understanding. But this article actually talks about 2 to 3 things other than that also, which is that why is WTO struggling more than what it used to? What is the biggest issue which has emerged for the WTO per se? And over and above that, you have the concept of what is called as the way forward, where we can do something about it. So the context of the article is the Cameroon MC14, the Ministerial Conference of WTO 14, which is coming on 26th to 29th of March, and finding solutions for the global order. Looking at the trend in the past 3 years, and I'm asking you this question: has the US actually abided by any of the rules or regulations or the order which the WTO has created? Tell me. Has the US, the most important body which is the one which basically holds this order together, has it abided by any of the rules? And the answer to that question is no. From the tariff wars which Trump started, from the way the US unilaterally entered into Venezuela, the way US has been coerced to act against Iran right now, to the way the US responded to how India was fighting for its sovereignty when it comes to trade profile. So the idea is very simple. The idea is very simple. When we talk about the most important actor, the US itself, it is doing what is called as coercive trade, which is tariff wars, putting irrational tariffs, and then coercing countries to agree to FTAs or BTAs, which is bilateral trade agreements or free trade agreements. Now, if we had to summarize for a question, what are the three major issues or three main problems which exist within this regime itself, the WTO regime, first and foremost is something you must have heard somewhere, which is that the dispute redressal mechanism. The dispute redressal mechanism, the appellate body where you would go if two countries are disputing, is as of right now empty because the US had to nominate members to the appellate body. And the US had refrained from doing it. Now, what type of a dispute can this body take up? For example, India can produce solar cells at a very, very low cost. But India is bound by the WTO regulations and the most favored nation understanding that if we have gone into an agreement with the US to get solar panels, we have to take from them because we are abiding to WTO rules. We can produce it for much cheaper, but we still have to buy it from the US. And India made this an issue and took it to the WTO appellate body, but that body as of right now does not exist. For now, close to 4 to 5 years, this appellate body has no member. Therefore, all disputes are just lying in WTO, which in turn pushes everybody to go for BTAs or FTAs because therein there is no third party arbitration concept. There is no third party arbitration concept. The second issue which the WTO is facing as of right now is that it is not able to keep up with the changing world. If I ask you, out of the last 10 things which you bought, how many did you buy it from offline stores and online stores? Your percentage of online or digital commerce is going to be much higher vis-a-vis offline purchases. Now, WTO has not been able to evolve any rules and regulation for cross-border digital commerce. And this is again a very big issue. That when it comes to digital commerce, there is no real rules, regulations which have been put into place. If you're ordering of Alibaba, if you're ordering of any website which is not Indian, there is a lot of, you can say, confusion on what are the rules and regulations which are applied on that trade itself. And last but not the least is consensus building. And this is one of the biggest issues which the WTO faces. 166 members, all have their own agendas, all have different levels of development, all have their own propaganda. And what happens is there's no consensus which is building. Therefore, WTO is paralyzed by policy paralysis, wherein there is no policy which is coming through because of no consensus. Second, it is itself not able to grow properly because it is not able to keep pace with the changing times itself. And if there is any dispute, it is going to a body which technically does not even exist. So at the WTO level, the problem is that there is no dispute redressal or dispute redressal mechanism as of right now, not able to be relevant in a changing world. At the same point of time, no consensus building, because of narrow interests. So if you look at the WTO, it in itself is becoming more and more obsolete. But there is one more factor which is working on the WTO, which is changing global order, which is called as wrecking ball principle. And we are witnessing a very good example of what is called as wrecking ball mechanism or wrecking ball principle. Countries are now more and more persuaded, more and more determined to wreck global order, wreck the supply chain in order to get short-term gains. So the idea is that short-term gains are more important than long-term order. And this is the biggest issue which the WTO is facing as of right now. The WTO cannot do anything to Iran because it has destroyed it has disrupted the global supply chain through the Strait of Hormuz. Global order would mean how WTO has tried to envisages a supply chain which is free for all. But here the simple straightforward point is disrupt everything. Wrecking ball politics, wrecking ball principle, which is rather than going for a long-term solution, just wreck the order. This is what the US is also doing, which is Trump in a way pioneered this concept, which is if you are not going to agree to me, I will just wreck the tariff policy with you and then you will be persuaded to do something. So therefore, this wrecking ball politics and short-term coercive actions which are happening has changed the world itself. So in a way, what we see is that the WTO has its own institutional problems, which is internal to it. These are institutional issues. But at the same point of time, there is a change in the way the world sees the whole global supply chain. If nobody is going to listen to me, I will wreck the global order. That is easier for me than going to a dispute redressal mechanism. And this global wrecking principle or global wrecking ball politics is now showing its real colors. The best example being the Strait of Hormuz blockage. Now, for a UPSC aspirant, knowing the issues is one thing. But now when the ministerial conference happens for the WTO, how can they go forward? How can they change this? This is where there are two things which they have to work on. First is trust. First is trust. The lack of consensus has to be brought in, and you have to create a global trust-based system, which is already something which we don't think will come into focus. At the same point of time, transparency and dispute redressal. These are things which have meaning today, but per se don't really exist amongst countries. Meaning trust, consensus are things which are not part of the global vocabulary per se. So therefore, if there is a question such as this, discuss the relevance and issues the WTO faces today or simple straightforward issues, challenges or way forward with regards to the WTO, which is the future of WTO. I hope you will be able to now write an answer. I hope you will be able to articulate an answer where the challenge and issue part is done. At the same point, way forward is done. Here, way forwards are less, issues and challenges are more. Anybody has any issue here? Will you be able to articulate an answer based on whatever discussion we've had till this point? Yes, sir. Okay. Now, the second article deals with and gives us a very interesting perspective about demography of India. Now, in your static geography and in, for example, economics, you must have heard of certain buzzwords. Those buzzwords would be demographic dividend, the concept of dependency ratio, then you must have heard of fertility ratio, then working population, these are words which you may have been introduced to. So, the concept of how we are a young nation, we have a lot of potential to be the worker of the future, and we can use this young population to be the driver of change and development across the world. That is the demographic dividend. Dependency ratio is as our young population becomes more and more old, the old age population will be dependent on the workforce, and therefore the working population will be under the pressure to service or to help the elderly. That is dependency ratio. Fertility ratio, fertility rate, as you would know, is the rate at which the population is reproducing. At the same point of time, working population or the what we call as workplace dependency ratio, or how many people are part of the workforce itself, 15 to 59, this is the most important population for us because they are the ones who are going to drive New India forward. Now, this article deals with all of these terms and gives us trends. That is why it's a very important article, because it gives us data which we can use in our answers for the mains examination, and generally from prelims we can find out the trends, overall trends, general trends per se. Now, the first most important assertion which is made by this article is that our population, which is in 2021 at 1355 million, that is going to increase to, in 2051, in the next 30 years, it will become 1590 million. Now, if you do the calculations, the average annual increase in population is 0.5%. 0.5%. 0.5%. Now, this is an important data because it tells us that India's population is not going to explode because of the fertility rate which is declining as of right now, or has stabilized to a certain point, that this one 1355 million is not going to become 200 million, 230 million, which is 2300 million, which is, it will not double itself. India has surpassed China with regards to population per se, but there was a chance that the annual increase could be at 2% or 3%. So one thing has become clear looking at the demographic indicators, that India's population explosion debate should be now thrown out of the window, because India's population is not going to explode after a certain point of time. The basic data tells us from 2021, 1355 million to 1590 million, a very steady but slow population growth from here. This can be attributed to states performing, southern states specifically performing better in demographic indicators, change in the perception of the new generations with regards to reproduction and the purpose of reproduction. There is generally a trend where people have started to first figure out their own life before they have children. And there's a general trend where the fertility rate of the modern generations are going down. This may be because of the economic pressure which they feel. It may be because of the larger perceptual change which is happening. It could be socio, it could be economic. But this is a very interesting trend which is going to emerge. Now this article deals with the implications of this. What is the implication of this steady growth but slow growth? Now, the first thing which it is going to impact is the population which is going to be in the age between 0 to 4 years. Here again, a lot of data was given. I've tried to systematize it into a table. It argues that in the population trend between 0 to 4, there's going to be a decline from 113 million in 2021 to 8.6 million by 2051. Meaning the number of, or the percentage of population between 0 to 4 years of age between 2021 to 2051, this is going to decline. And this is where it argues that with declining fertility, the school infrastructure, which is right now stressed to a point that education sector is not able to grow, that will be eased. Kerala or Keralam is a very, very good example of how the changing fertility pattern can have an impact on teacher recruitment, on school infrastructure, and teacher to pupil ratio. The idea being that we have already seen that the number of government schools are declining. The number of private schools are increasing because people believe that the aspiration is to give good education, and good education comes from the private sector itself. And therefore, for school infrastructure, there is going to be the ease of pressure. The pressure which is as of right now leading to government schools to have a ratio of 1:200, 1:150, which is not favorable, that is going to change. So this is a positive impact wherein there will be ease of pressure on the education sector, specifically schools per se. Now, if I go into the demographic dividend concept, what is the implication of this on demographic dividend? The data suggests that our working age population as of right now 15 to 59 is one of the biggest in the world. From 833 million, which is 833 million, it will increase and peak in 2041 at 1,000 million workers. Then it will stabilize to 998 and likely to go down after 2051. But 60% of our population will be still working when we are in 2051, which is a very, very good number. Very, very good number. 2051, 60% of our population will be still working. That is a presumption, Lux, within the article, that there is a general perception that private education is better than government education. That may not be true, but that is the assumption. Now, this is a very, very, very important slide for you because this data is important. You can quote this data either in your GS paper 3, GS paper 4, GS paper 2 when it comes to governance, when it comes to economics, when it comes to any form of health. You can talk about this. That our working age population peaks at 2041, 2051, still 60% of our population is working. But a corollary of this, an extension of this same concept is dependency ratio. When we talk about dependency ratio, 130 million people are age 60 plus in 2021. By 2051, that will be 325 million, 20% of the population. Median age is going to rise from 28 years, which is in 2021, to 40 years in 2051. And this will increase the dependency ratio. And when there will be dependency ratio increase, we need to structurally shift our infrastructure out of education into healthcare. This is where all of this data has certain indications. Now, again, asking you a very simple, straightforward question. If you look at the workforce today, percentage-wise, highest percentage of workforce is in the formal sector, informal sector. Formal sector, informal sector. Come on, tell me. Formal, informal. Formal would be with social security, informal would be gig economy, no real social security, contractual jobs. Yes, and the answer is informal sector. Most of the population, as of right now, works in contractual jobs, informal. Now, this is where the real problem lies. Now, see, by 2051, mean age is going to become 40. Dependency ratio is going up, will go up, and working population will account for 60%, but dependent population will be close to 20%, approximately. Approximately, this is what has been 20.5%, significant increase. Now, the problem is that this population between the age of 15 years and 59 years, they have mostly been in informal sector. If they have been in part of the informal sector, do you expect them to have pension or some form of GPF, some form of social security safety net, which they may have produced for themselves during their period of being the part of the workforce? Simple question. If most of their life went into the informal sector, then it is very clear that when they will reach the age of the mean age of 40, or when they will become dependent, they will struggle with no safety net. Now, going by the pollution, plus global warming plus health pandemics this population will be the most vulnerable, both economically and health wise also. What am I trying to say here is that whilst the education sector may see a decrease in pressure, the health sector will see an exponential increase in pressure from the same population. Formal sector would mean there is some form of pension, they are saving some form of EPFO, GP or GPF, and they will get a lump sum money which they can use for their own, you can say, well-being after a certain age. Formal sector has a lot of different perks. Most of India's population still does not have an insurance. If you have gone through the data of insurance penetration into our population is still less than 20%. At a given point of time, 7 to 14% it hovers between. So 80% of our population does not have health insurance or any form of insurance behavior. So very simply, the last point is that whilst the education sector will see an ease of pressure, there will be an exponential increase in the pressure which the health sector will see, because this population is going to be vulnerable both in economic terms and in health terms. So at the same point of time, we will see a shift. This is what is the main point here. Whilst there will be less students entering the education sector, there will be better teacher to pupil ratio. There will be need for less childbirth services and maternity services, which will lead to better allocation of resources when it comes to healthcare, which may allow for our country to plan better for family and demographic concepts. But the exact, this is maybe positive, the exact negative is going to be that the health sector will now have to deal with a population which it does not actually deals with right now. When 20% of the population is going to be above 40 plus, or the mean age is around 40, and we have a very high dependency ratio, the same health sector would have to see a transition. Now, this transition cannot happen overnight. It has to be done systematically. Systematically in a way that it takes into consideration this demographic change. So, in UPSC, you can get a question in GS paper 3, something like this. The health sector will face unique challenges by the mid 21st century. Elucidate. This is the first type of question which can come. At the same point of time, there can be a question that India's demographic profile is changing. What will be the implications? Of the same. They can now word it in any way possible. So whilst yes, one side saying that yes, education sector pressure will reduce, but when education sector pressure will reduce, because if less students are entering, that will in turn lead to better teacher to pupil ratio, because less students are there for a teacher to teach. But healthcare sector will see an exponential increase, and that exponential increase will come from the high dependency ratio and the mean age reaching above 40. Most of our elders right now come from that generation who have consumed mostly non-adulterated food, have lived in villages which were not populated and were in sectors where there was no COVID-19 type viruses. But if you look at our generation, you can go through any form of food substance. Vegetables are spiked with pesticides. We mostly eat adulterated food. The adulteration levels in India with regards to food, with regards to milk, with regards to oil, with regards to packed foods, fast food generation, we are one of the unhealthiest of them. And when we will become 40, 45, 50, we will have very unique issues which will be very specific to our generation. Obesity and BP, along with which is called as cardiovascular diseases, was not something which was a problem maybe 2 to 3 decades back. But we are that generation, because of a sedentary life, we have become like this. So the simple point which I'm trying to point out is that we, because of the environment around us, the way we live, we will create unique issues for the healthcare sector. The simple point which this article is trying to make is we have to take into account all of these concepts. And when we take this into account, our policy decisions should be the same. So when you will become an IAS officer and you are asked, you are given a choice, create a school or a hospital, and you are doing this in 2030, what will you prefer, a school or a hospital? You tell me. Going by the demographic trend, that is why we are doing this. Going by the demographic trend, what will you choose? School or hospital? If you had to allocate funds. Not a school, but a hospital. Because the school may not have the same pressure as much as your district may have for the healthcare sector. So you have to go by the trend that the healthcare sector will be under pressure very quickly, and you have to make sure that the healthcare sector is strengthened in your district. It is not about education, it is not about healthcare, it is about how your district is going to respond after a certain age to the challenges which is going to come through. Creating 50 schools vis-a-vis 50 hospitals is going to help you rather than the schools. It's not that you don't construct schools, because schools itself are seeing an ease of pressure. It is about prioritizing the healthcare sector because our population is going to become old, and that is going to be a unique challenge in itself. Right? Okay. Now, we've discussed two very important editorials. I hope that they made sense and they've given you some form of insight which is unique, and is generally, these are very interesting articles that way. Now we have a data point. This data point has a very unique stance. What this data point does is, it looks at three important, you can say, data sets. And the trigger to go through this data is what recently US did. A Tomahawk missile hit a school in Iran where 168 children, mostly aged between 7 to 12, were killed in that attack. And the reason for that was the US was using outdated targeting data, whilst there is a naval base next to the school of the Islamic Revolutionary Group's corps, but in their data that building was also a military establishment, a military installment. And therefore, when the Tomahawk missile hit, Trump first said that Iran did it for themselves. But everybody knows that Iran does not have a Tomahawk missile, one of the most precision cruise missiles used previously also. Then the US media itself clarified and actually pointed out that that hit was not by the US, was not by the Iranians, but was by the US. And this in turn creates a narrative and creates an opportunity for us to understand what is the impact of wars on children, and what is the fatality, and what is the way in which different countries actually target populations. Now, this is where there is a two very interesting set of data. When we talk about lethal external attacks, meaning any country which is attacking a country outside its zone, and it's lethal, meaning it is based on force, it is based on some form of ammunition. Russia has 55.7% total number. If 1,000 attacks were done, 55% were Russian, 13% were Israeli, 11% were United States, Turkey 3.7%, and African Union 2.9%. Meaning, taking into account all the major, you can say, conflict zones, Russia has the biggest share in external lethal attacks. But a very interesting data is that if we take into consideration how many of these lethal attacks hit children, 40%, 40.9% external attack ended in casualty of at least one child between 1996 to 2026, which is in the past 2 decades. 40% of all Israeli attacks were actually on children. US 20%, Russia 18%, Turkey 5.9%, Pakistan 1.3%. But if we take this data even more in a data set where we're looking at comparative perspective, lethal external attacks that ended up in a child fatality, only 1.2% of all the attacks actually did it, while 11.2% and 7.1% of United States and Israeli. What is the point of this discussion? The point of the discussion is 41% of all external attacks by Israel ended with a child fatality. That is 1 in every 9 lethal attacks, which is 11%, launched by the Israeli hit a child. And according to the UN Charter, death of children is considered to be one of the biggest, known as genocide. This is where this data is quite glaring of what Israel is trying to do. Israel in the Gaza Strip in West Bank has killed more children than adults, and 20,000 children have been killed just between 2023 and 2025. This is an astonishing number which tells you what is this idea of extermination of population hitting the 0 to 5, 0 to 10 years, 0 to 12 years of age, newborns. They have no fault. They didn't choose to be in West Bank. They didn't choose to be in Palestine. They are not the ones who are stone peddlers. They are not the ones who are taking up arms. Their family is killed. Their parents are killed. And they respond by extremism later. But the point is that Israel, when it hits a target, somehow it is hitting more children than adults. This is a very glaring data which should have some implication. Though unfortunately the UN has no real power, the idea is very simple. When Russia attacks, it is attacking precision attacks on military installments. Civilian population being killed as part of military, civilian population being killed as part of military establishments or military what we call as exercises is not the way to go forward. Then there's no difference between World War I, World War II and what is happening right now. The enemy is an enemy, but the children are not the enemy of the state. So very simply, the reason for this is that Israel does not really take into account that if that building has civilian establishment or non-civilian establishment. It's a military or a civilian establishment. This is where there's a use of blunt force here. And the bluntness of that force in turn manifests itself in this form. So and this is only the official data. Please understand this point. This is only official data, which means that there is more data which has not been accounted for. We don't have to get caught up into the data per se. What we have to understand here is the nature of attacks per se. This is a very, very glaring data wherein any country which is attacking for past 2 decades, Israel's attack are more targeted towards a population which is younger, which really may not know what they are part of. So this is where this data point tries to point out that how US is getting influenced by this Israeli understanding. US may have used outdated data, but not verifying that data as a superpower makes no sense whatsoever. 168 children killed in one go is not a joke, the way Trump would take it in that regard. So again, interesting things we get to know, sad equally and shocking in that regard. Okay, now moving away from these three editorials, we go into smaller topics but important topics for you, specifically for prelims. The first one is with regards to a recent report which has come through. Levels and Trends in Child Mortality report was recently published, and 4.9 million children died before reaching the age of 5 years, including 2.3 million children who were killed as newborns. There are multiplicity of reasons for this, but we believe that there's a reduction in child mortality rate. But since 2015, the pace at which this reduction is happening is slower. Now, again, this article is very, you can say, text heavy, or it has a lot of data for you. Let's systematize it. For India, again, important for the exam, our neonatal mortality rate, which is just 0 to 26 days, 28 days, maximum 1 month, has gone down from 57 in 1990 to 17 per 1,000 births. This is a very big win. That immediately after birth, the children are not dying. Previously, it used to be 57 out of 1,000. Now it is 17 out of 1,000. Good. Under 5 mortality rate means 0 to 5 population. It used to be 127 per 1,000. It has now become 27 per 1,000. Again, major reduction. Why? Because of public health interventions, immunization, better neonatal antenatal care, because of the schemes which the government of India is running, and one of the major changes is vaccine coverage. Death between 5 to 24 years of age, 2.1 million deaths globally. Cause of that death was mostly disease, self-harm, they harm themselves somehow, and road accidents. Severe acute malnutrition, something which India used to face in scores, that is at 1 lakh deaths, 5% of total. But malnutrition impact is more on 3 very specific countries. India has done very well. We should bring these two to single digit as quickly as possible. But Pakistan, Somalia and Sudan are 3 countries which are the high burden countries. Again, important. Here 50% of all deaths under 5 are happening in these 3 countries. And the reason for that is either labor complications, pro-term complications before death or before birth or after birth, disease, and sub-Saharan Africa has 58% of all deaths in under 5. Meaning least developed countries are trying to manage this data, but the biggest burden is on them. I'll not call Pakistan a LDC per se, but it is acting like an LDC here because its priorities and principles are totally misplaced per se. Getting after Afghanistan is more important than actually doing service to their own population. But the idea is very simple. India has done well. India is doing well, and India should further reduce this load. So important for the examination, this data you will not find readily Please don't use, sometimes you don't use AI for this data because it collates it out of random sources. These are sources which are authenticated by the newspaper, by the Hindu, and are generally considered to be important and trustworthy. Simple, straightforward, Ram Singh, simple, straightforward thing. The overall burden has reduced, but the slow pace of reduction is not good. India has done well from double digit and triple digit deaths to double digit deaths from 57 to 17 to 127 to 27, and we will do better further. It is because of our you can say interventions. Sudan, Pakistan, Somalia are the three countries which have 50% of all the deaths, and they are doing it because of these issues. They have to manage these issues, then only they can do it. They are holding the main burden per se. That is the whole point. This slide may not be that important, but this one is more important for you because it has India based it. Right? Global trends is on this. The next topic is something which is equally important for us, which is what is going to be the impact of the war on different sectors. We've already discussed tea, we've discussed crude oil, LPG you may be seeing yourself. Now plastics or plastic industry is also going to be impacted because plastic is a byproduct of the petroleum sector itself. Therefore, petrochemical and crude oil manufacturing, 50 to 60% increase has already been there. The plastic industry is saying that as of right now, we are managing the stockpile, but the point is that if this war goes on further, there will be implications in plastic, and there could be a 50 to 60% inflation or rise in the price of plastic. And what is interesting here is this could also lead to food inflation. Why? Because the plastic which is used in the food industry for packing, that has already started to increase from 23 rupees per bag to 29 rupees per bag. At the end of the day, who will bear the brunt of this increase of prices? You and me as consumers. So now we are seeing that the direct impact of the Israel and the Iran war would have been only on petrochemicals. But now the byproducts of petrochemicals are also seeing inflation from $80 per barrel to close to $100 to 120, may reach till $200 per barrel. There is going to be implications. You and me are the one who are going to bear the implications of, as consumers, of this forced rise in prices. So this is a warning, but trying to show you how all these industries are interconnected together, right? Correlation, interconnection, integrated economy, global economy, whatever you want to call. Thereafter, last two topics, simple, straightforward. The first one deals with a new scheme, BHAVYA plan. The cabinet has given approval to it, called as the Bharat Udyogik Vikas Yojana, BHAVYA. 33,000 crores has been allocated for 100 plug and play industrial parks. Idea being, we will develop industrial parks where all the infrastructure is there, sewage, water, electricity, you can say even supply of certain raw materials, and we will create a multimodal connectivity last mile access based plug and play parks, which the private sector can then either enter into or can lease or can rent. The idea is very simple. 100 acres in most cases, 25 acres in northeastern states, as big as 1,000 acres. The government of India is going to promote these plug and play tech park, not tech parks per se, but industrial parks. So they will bring in maybe rail line, good road connectivity, electricity, water, sewage, all the basic amenities together, and under the BHAVYA scheme, they will create tech parks which can then be leased out to industries which can then be the drivers of India's growth. So interesting, that was a good scheme. Let's see how much it goes through. A very big sum has been allocated, and where is it done is equally important. Meaning where are these tech parks are equally important, because that will dictate the state GDP also in that regard. The last topic, and that's a small point before we end this session, is that the Large Hadron Collider operated by CERN has now found a new particle. This is the most important. This term is very, very important for you. This is the new particle which has been found, proton, and it is believed that this may give us better understanding of quantum mechanics. This may give us better understanding of quantum mechanics. Please understand one thing very clearly. You don't have to go into the details here. You don't have to go into the details here per se, but you should just know this term, because they can ask you in the examination, what is this term related to per se, right? So, no, you can just rely on this. The PPT of this session along with the marathon PPT will be uploaded into my Telegram channel. I hope that all of these topics made sense. I will see you tomorrow. Happy Ugadi to all of you. And tomorrow is Eid. So in advance, Eid Mubarak to everyone. But I will see you tomorrow, same time, 10 a.m. And we'll be discussing the Hindu newspaper in this much amount of detail as needed. Thank you. Take care.